Stronger. Faster.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko AJ tako ingoa, nau mai, haere mai. Hello, my name is AJ. Welcome. That's just a indicator that I come from New Zealand, and we're all quite a diverse panel of people here. And I thought we probably don't need much introductions if this is going to be on my channel, but we've got MrRhexx, Jordan the PH is Silent, and Josiah Dungeon Dad.
Buenos dias.
Hello.
Yeah, I can do that too.
Sup. Yeah. So we've got no real set schedule for this this chat that we're going to have. We're just basically going to be talking about D&D lore, the state of the game, and various topics about third-party publishing and things like that. And we'll cover what we cover and we won't what we won't. So to kick it off, I've got my first little question. I've got some suggestions from viewers. Where the fuck did this obsession with heist games come from? It seems to be quite a fad lately, even to the point that Rick and Morty did a mockery of it on one of their episodes. Have you guys got any thoughts as to where this come from? I kind of blame it on the Ocean 11 movies.
That was my first thought, was Ocean's 11. And I guess I disagree that there's an obsession with heists. Like, I've seen them in games. It's, I don't know, like, oh, fantasy, you guys have such an obsession with quests. Like, it's part of the game. Why are we? So.
Well, the funny thing too was that like Waterdeep, I was gonna say Dragon Heist, the Waterdeep Adventure Heist wasn't even a heist either, right? Like you're not necessarily just breaking into a place. It's more like you're just collecting clues and kind of just following the track, but you're not. I would imagine a heist would just have you plan some kind of break-in into a majorly fortified place.
Right. Yeah. So it seems like it's more like the planning process and the step after step after step and everybody coming together and doing things that seems to be the heist theme. It's the actual theft in itself is secondary to that.
I think for what it's worth too, with the Dragon Heist thing, as you mentioned, it's not even really a heist, but I think the fact that they called it Dragon Heist is very clear that like the Wizards of the Coast marketing team is tapping into the fact that like people want heists, even if the actual module itself wasn't like a heist point A, B, C, D kind of.
And I'm upset. I want the heist. What is this? So why aren't we getting a heist?
Yeah, let's steal some shit.
It's an untapped market.
Heists are great. Like I'll give a map of a real world building that I'm gonna use for my heist, and I'll be like, okay, guys, like. I'm going to walk away for an hour. You talk amongst yourself how you're going to get from here. You know where whatever you're getting. You know where the location of it, but you don't necessarily. And then I'll give them 3 flashbacks. So as they're playing, if they run into a problem like, oh my gosh, I don't have a key card for this, or I don't have this. I'm like, you can use your flashback to say, we prepped for this, and now I know how to get past it. Or the guards come and you just fight your way out, which is what usually happens, I think. So.
Awesome. Use inspiration for that, by the way. I love instead of just granting inspiration so that players can just roll with advantage or whatever, like I just make them do exactly that. Just kind of like, oh no, actually, cool. I did this thing way back before, like a flashback thing, and it works wonderfully.
That's fun.
Sweet. Cool. Okay. I've got a lot of people.
We actually need some heists. Like, let's get.
Yeah, we do need some heists. Yeah, there's probably a lot of more heists and stuff with third-party content, and so one of the subjects I want to talk about is third-party content and how important it is to 5th edition. Like it's massive right now. You can practically write your own checks with Kickstarters for books and things, and there's so much content coming at us 24/7. That it's almost like it feels to me that you could pick up a new PDF every week, and there's just a constant flow of new stuff that's coming at us that we can use, and it's almost like the that's the new norm now. So like your content, you may produce this really good book, but it's just going to fade away in a few months' time as new stuff comes along and along and along and along and along. So this constantly evolving third-party content game that's going on, whereas Wizards of the Coast is producing its Magic the Gathering crossovers and things like that. And I almost feel like 6th edition is Magic the Gathering stuff. It kind of feels like the setting has been snuck in under the radar. But the question I've got is, I've got a lot of people asking us to discuss the future of the game, but I kind of feel like the game is largely in the hands of homebrewers and self-publishers almost as much as the cash cow of Wizards of the Coast. The question is, should we be worried how much power is in the hands of independent companies that are handling all this third-party content, such as D&D Beyond website with all of its homebrew options and things like that? Because there's a huge archive of homebrewed monsters and items and stuff that is sitting there now. Also, Drive-Through RPG and the DM's Guild. The DM's Guild takes a hefty whack of the money that people earn by having them certified by their standards as official-ish D&D content, having the right to do that. Also, they gate what products can be print on demand, for instance, and the criteria that you have to meet for that. So how do we create some competition for those entities? And yeah, it's a situation because they hold a lot of power over independent creators right now.
I think in this case, I don't know if there's necessarily anything to worry about, just because I feel like markets will decide what people actually want, right? So if Paizo is doing their own thing, and they did, and it did well, people bought it, people love Pathfinder, right? Like, I feel like that's what's going to happen. So if for whatever reason Dungeons and Dragons, that being Wizards of the Coast, starts creating content that the people actually don't want, they start throwing the IP down the garbage, someone else is going to pick it up, right? If the DM's Guild starts charging too much for official content, right? If I want to create Eberron and they're going to charge me or take away 50% of my income on that homebrew that I create on Eberron, I don't even know if you can do Eberron, but whatever. Then I'll just create something else that might be like Eberron. And if people like it, they'll buy it. And if it does good, I'll make more. And that's just kind of how it goes. I'm not too afraid of this.
Yeah, we're kind of in a privileged position because as content creators that have got an audience, a pre-existing audience, we've already got a market advantage over everybody else, I think, and that's something we should be aware of too.
That's
if there's anything to be... Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, like, because you can definitely just say, hey, I'm putting up this book, and at the very least, like, your audience will be like, oh, okay, maybe I'll check that out. Also, something that I think is really worth noting about the DM's Guild, and as someone who was in the process of putting together a product to put out there for the first time, because it's, I think, owned by Wizards of the Coast, right, or they have some type of affiliation with them, you're allowed to use like a whole pool of artwork, because artwork is really expensive. So as someone who's just getting into it, like, that 50-50 split seems huge. But as someone who is in the process of making a monster book and using a huge chunk of that artwork that Wizards of the Coast allows you to use for your products, it doesn't feel as bad. Whereas if I were to put out a product that's, say, a brand new monster manual, like kind of what Cobalt Press does, with all original artwork, all original stat blocks, everything, then a 50-50 split feels kind of bad, because you're benefiting basically nothing from selling it on their platform. Whereas if you're up and coming or you don't have the budget to put into something like that, that 50-50 split sucks, but it's not like it's going nowhere. You're kind of paying that in order to use the artwork and stuff, which can make a big impact, especially for people who just are small budget creators.
Certainly makes an impact on independent artists who are trying to get work in official, official-ish D&D book products and things. It also allows Wizards of the Coast to control the visual imagery of their game.
That's very true as well. Yeah.
So also, I don't know, this hasn't been touched on, but like, you don't own it anymore if you put it on the DM's Guild. Mm-hmm. You own it if you put it on Drive-Through RPG. So the benefit of the DM's Guild is, yes, artwork, but more so the ability to make a Forgotten Realms game or an Eberron game or a Ravenloft game. Like, that is Wizards' intellectual property, and I can go make a whole Eberron game, and then I can't publish it, and I can't make things for the Artificer, and I can't do interesting stuff like that. I can't use the selling point that is Eberron or the Forgotten Realms. but there's nothing stopping you from making a sci-fi book and then going out and publishing it yourself. The fact that they control it after you give it away, well, and I say give it away, like you're getting a little bit of revenue here and there, but ultimately Wizards controls it. And if they want to shut down that website, if they want to like a new edition comes out and they really want to promote that, so they're like, we're not gonna allow all of this old 5th edition stuff to be written on the website anymore. It's like, oh well, can I have it back? No, like
that would be
that's kind of
spooky.
And I don't like that, because that was still your idea, like your monster manual. That's still like a really cool monsters, but now I can't recreate those for something else because I don't own it anymore. So I have something on the DM's Guild because I wanted to see what it was like to publish something, and it's up there for like $1, and I make a little bit of money off of it, but mostly it was just like, this is kind of fun to try. But there's a part of me that's really sad that I don't have that, and I can't re-release it anywhere, kind of a thing.
That's important for people to know. I mean, like if you have the ability, if you want to make a business out of this, because there's a lot of people that are coming in on this homebrew game with the intent of specifically making money. Because obviously there's the people that are just having fun, right? Like they're just whatever. But if you want to make money, if you want this to be your thing, don't lose your IP.
Yeah.
Like that is the greatest advice that I can give you. If you are hard at work in creating a book or any kind of creative project, make sure that you have control over your IP. Don't give it away for free. And if you have the ability to just switch a few things, if you have the ability to just switch a few things, and instead of calling your project Eberron, call it Echelon, and just make it a little bit different, do that. 100%. Don't sign away.
And there's nothing wrong with saying like things that inspired me. I really love Eberron, but like it's an inspiration is not a direct thing. I mean, it's a fine line, and I'm not a lawyer, so don't take anything I say or take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I look at these Kickstarters and I'm like, I think they're doing it correct. Like it's more work than the DM's Guild, but man, like to be able to have a book and to publish it on your own demands, and I can put it on the DM's Guild, or I can put it, or not the DM's Guild, I can put it on Drive Through RPG, which is literally the same website as the DM's Guild. Yep. It's just not controlled by Wizards.
I will say, a lot of these people don't have control over their IP on Kickstarter. I don't want to say anything more than that.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I've not done a Kickstarter, so I don't know. You're right.
Yeah. Some of them,
because there's a lot of parent companies that are partnering with these people to make books, and maybe they don't control it. I don't know. So.
Yeah, we live in a golden age of self-publishing, that's for sure. There are more avenues available to us than there were before. We don't have to have the printed products ready to go before we find an audience. So we've got that benefit of being able to create without having a budget, to produce products that may not sell. And that was the crippling thing that really killed TSR originally, was they produced all these card games and dice games, things like that, and they didn't sell anything, and they didn't have any money to produce any new products, so they just got screwed really, and they had to sell it off. So that's a lesson for us all, I suppose. And Wizards of the Coast doesn't seem to have that problem. They've got Hasbro, which has unlimited pockets. Yeah.
No,
on the other hand,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, because that's true. But the one caveat of being subject to corporations that are that big is that the second that you're not profitable, you get axed. They don't care. They give a fuck.
Yeah.
It's making money.
Extraordinarily cutthroat, right? Because if you're not contributing to the bottom line, I mean, we all see that. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this too. Like on YouTube, like, if you put out a video that does sucky, YouTube's not like, oh, let's help you out with the algorithm. It's like, oh, the algorithm has decided this is bad, so go away. Like, you're never going to get that level of empathy from a company like Wizards of the Coast.
Bear in mind that every single person at Wizards of the Coast is expendable.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that to go back to your original question, the importance of homebrew, like D&D is built on homebrew. Like back in 80s and 90s, everybody was making, I want custom magic items and I want this. And you were always kind of hacking the game. And I think that's part of Dungeons and Dragons. The fact that we have the OGL to do that in a profitable way is really cool. But I also think, as a company, like going back to Hasbro, I think they look at all of this and they're just like, wow, man, these companies are making a lot of money off of us. Like, we're the ones making D&D popular. So I wouldn't be surprised if this changes in the future, you know. But fortunately for us, you'll always have the OGL and the SRD for 5th edition. So even if, much like 3rd edition and 4th edition, where 4th edition didn't have that, and you couldn't make 4th edition stuff because they wanted to control all of it, well, then everyone just used what they could use and made new stuff. And then you got Pathfinder. And so, yeah.
On that subject, that was a nice segue actually. Who are your favorite third-party content creators at the moment, and who do you think could potentially be the new Paizo if Wizard of the Coast fucks up 6th edition, if there is going to be one?
I mean, I like Cold Press, but they don't need my help. Like, they're doing quite well.
Which is exactly why I think that they'd be the ones to do it, right?
Their monster manuals are really great, and their adventures are fun. So I think they're just doing really well.
Have you had anything to do with their Midgard world setting, though?
I haven't done anything with Midgard, no. Like, I've never played in it. I've never read of anything about it. Yeah. I've only read the adventure of the Shadow Fae Court one or something, but yeah. It's
a hefty beast. Yeah. And quite a complicated world, and very interesting. And it's Wolfgang Bauer, who is very D&D. He's got a lot of D&D roots. So interesting.
I think Monte Cook Games will do something too. Like, I mean, they're dipping their toes into 5th edition, because they made Arcane of the Ancients, and they're making more stuff. And like, Monty's just a really good game designer, and so for him to be like, "Oh, these are my tools," I'll just and he makes something really cool. So that would be a direction to look at as well if Monte Cook Games wanted to expand.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Raging Swan, and I encourage them to put out more content, more of their random roll tables and stuff, and take those things online and make them more searchable. Would be really great. So if Raging Swan Press is watching this, please put out like some web tools for random roll tables and things like that, but using your excellent resources, because I would use them every single day.
Yeah, I don't really know much about third parties. Like, I don't really use a lot of those. Like, I haven't played Shadowrun. Is that a third? I don't even like.
That's a whole separate game.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I just started learning like Pathfinder, playing the Wrath of the Righteous video game. Like, I don't know anything about any of this other, Kobold Press and I don't really. I know that Ghostfire Gaming obviously has been doing a lot of stuff. I've promoted them a lot. They have their own campaign setting, and like their monster manuals coming out now, and they're doing like a bunch of stuff, and they're doing a really good job. But other than that, man, this is like a whole world.
That's another one.
Pathfinder has got Starfinder, of course. I'm really interested in Starfinder, but I'm not interested in the Pathfinder rule system. So I'm kind of in a bind there, because I really want a Starfinder-esque expansion for 5th edition. We've got Stargate SG1 is putting out the Stargate people are putting out an official RPG through Kickstarter. That's I've got the PDF for that. As I heard
the Lord of the Rings one did really good. There's like a Lord of the Rings 5th edition, whatever, book.
It's a really good book. It's you can't get it anymore, I don't think. But really? I bought the PDF back in the day, and it's good. Like, I had a whole journey mechanic, which I thought was really cool.
That is
where
cool.
The journey is an important part to the story rather than just getting there. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, the Stargate one has got some extra expansions to 5th edition rules in task-based, like non-combat encounters, like skill challenges and social encounters and diplomatic encounters and things like that, which is really interesting. And that's the stuff that I want to see from third-party content creators for 5th edition, is expanding on the available tool set that we have. So like the Gazettas and stuff that we get with Mordenkainens and Tarshans and things, I want products that have got a grab bag of things that I can pick and put into any setting for 5th edition, because that's the whole point of having a universal game system.
I don't want it. What I need is more adventures, but like more diverse, like weird adventures. I want you to put me on a ship, and just like a cruise ship, and just have an adventure just set there where like every night somebody dies and you have to figure out who's the murderer, and like just come up with a kooky weird, like just a haunted mansion adventure where it's just the haunted mansion, like Luigi's Mansion style, level 1 to level 11, just in the mansion. That's it. I feel like
there's a lot of good stuff like that on the DMs Guild, honestly.
Yeah.
But again, the problem with the DMs Guild is it's very frustrating website to navigate to find the good content. And yeah, but I know for a fact that there's a whole Eberron Jurassic Park game that's really good where
Yes.
It's got all these stupid Jurassic Park like inside jokes, but you're running around with halflings on raptors and it's good. Like these are really good adventures and they're awesome, but like you don't hear about them. I don't know. It's like up to the creators to really advertise it. And after a certain point, you're like, I'm tired of advertising. So
I want that on Roll20 included with dynamic lighting, all this beautiful fucking art. Like that's what I want. Just
don't go in the tall grass.
That's, I think, honestly, Rex, you touched on something really interesting there, is that I think my biggest issue with a lot of the published, like 5th edition Wizards of the Coast stuff is all the adventures are so huge in scope. Like, not to say there's anything wrong with having a campaign that starts small and gets out of control, because obviously, like, that's what happens with level progression. But you never see those games, like you said, where it's just like a singular location, that's the game. Like the Haunted Mansion, for example, like the whole thing takes place inside of there. And you're right, there is a lot of stuff like that on the DM's Guild, but I would love to see like a 5th edition like first party product with Wizards money behind it and all these like talented writers and stuff doing something like that, which I mean,
wasn't that Candlekeep though? Like
I guess, yeah, Candlekeep is kind of did that because it's all centralized in the one location. But to be honest, I haven't had a chance to run it yet, so I'm not as familiar with that. But
well, as hardcore content creators, we don't get a chance to run a lot of stuff, unfortunately. that's the sacrifices we make.
But it's Candlekeep. That's not like a full adventure, right? It's just like a multiple like Ghost of Saltmarsh style kind of just like collection of adventures.
It's a collection of adventures, but it all ties back to the library Candlekeep.
Okay.
So I from what I remember, you like enter into different worlds through books. So there's like a loose kind of connection as you're like exploring magical books that take you different places. So you could play it. It was designed to be like you could play this all the way through, or you could just pick up the level 5 adventure and play that. So
yeah, we've got Sigil mentioned in the DMG. So I could see Sigil being another adventure location that they could expand on for another adventure gazetteer like that, like a planet portal type.
I would love a big. I want a city book, I guess. I want like the Waterdeep book or the Neverwinter book or like Sigil, like you were just saying. Like I think that.
Oh, I want to be
so useful for me as a dungeon master.
I was so pissed with Waterdeep Dragon Heist because they spent so many pages of the book just redoing the same, like, okay, well, it's the same thing, but like in this season, and then like the same thing, but now in autumn.
Yeah.
And like the bosses, you couldn't really, I guess I don't want to spoil too much or whatever, but like you're not even meant to kill the bosses, and there were 4 of them, and each of them had their own like lair and big locations or whatever that the book described, and you never even get to see them. And I was like, man, like so many pages wasted where I feel like I wanted a real normal adventure set in the city with real content. I've been really salty about the amount of filler that these books have had in the past. Whether it is just like Storm King's Thunder with a lot of locations that like you don't really even get to visit, or whether it is, what was the other example?
Tomb of Annihilation.
Tomb of Annihilation felt fine. The thing about Tomb is that there were a lot of locations that you might have been unlikely to visit all if you left them where they were located, but you could always move them. So if I wanted to, I could have my players experience every single location in a line. But I'm thinking, I haven't read the new adventure, the Feywild adventure, but they only take you to level 8, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but they spend a bunch of pages sort of describing how to run a D&D adventure as if this was the starter kit.
Yeah.
So I don't remember how many pages they spent doing that, but it was.
They did that with Ravenloft to really hone in that you could play it differently. But I agree. Like, if you're at that level buying these, I don't know if you need those pages of like, what is an RPG? Like, probably know what you're buying.
I know Fandelver did a fair amount of that, but that was also kind of meant to be like baby DM's first big adventure, right? So.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people who have played Phandelver and really enjoyed it, who are quite experienced DMs, because it's just a well structured. It's just
a good adventure.
Yeah. So I've got no problem with Phandelver for sure. I do think that Chult was culturally devoid. Like the Chult was just like sort of squeezed out of there, and we had a very bland product as a result of it.
Oh, I loved it, dude. I loved Annihilation. What are you talking about? I loved it. I just wish that they gave us more reasons to stay in Portney and Sour. It was just like, here's a city, you have a cool map, a lot of things to do, and now get out of here. There's a curse, and you can come back. Like it's timed. Let's go. Yeah. And it's like
there's some Tabaxi who are doing some stuff, and there's a dragon. Like there's a dinosaur race, and I think my adventurers went into a bar, and that was it. And then they were out of the city.
Yeah, there's like a slave pit, like battle. You can be dropped into a pit, and then you have to do the dinosaur run or whatever. Where like you have to get to the other side of this pit without dying to the dinosaurs. It's a couple of fun things.
Yeah. Okay, on to another topic. All of the monsters, getting into D&D lore and monsters as we do. All the monsters can't exist on the campaign world at the same time, can they? Part A. And if they can, how the hell can civilization survive? And if they can't, how much stock can we put in the game lore really? Do we, as lore providers, produce a much more solid sort of version of the world than it really is? It's a bit more, the Tarrasque may not actually be on Toril and stuff. What do you guys think of that?
Well, isn't that like we have planar travel and stuff? So I guess I don't understand the question. Is it like, is there not enough room for all of these monsters to be here at the same time? Because probably, but like you're not warping in, 70 fire elementals to, I don't know, like, or they're not just existing in your campaign world. Same with aboleths and far realm creatures. So maybe the Tarrasque is slumbering underneath, or maybe he's teleported in every 1,000 years and erupts from under the ground. Like, who knows? And I guess, I don't know, does it matter? Do you need to have all of that?
Seems to matter to some people. I get a lot of comments about it. I get a lot of comments like, how many dragons are there and how could they possibly all exist on the world? And my answer is a lot of the time, most of them who are not juveniles, the adults and onwards, are sleeping. They spend a lot of time inactive, like cats, just sort of lying on a thing.
And how many mountains are there that nobody's living in? And
huge tracts of land.
It's a big world, and I think the population density is a lot less than Earth. So
it depends a lot
because of dragons. They're gonna eat you. You don't go and settle those mountains.
Yeah, like some monsters are obviously like very, very rare, where like I wouldn't expect like an adventurer to ever find them, right? Monsters like ancient dragons, right? So like I'm pretty sure that we know every single ancient dragon that exists in the Forgotten Realms, at least in the Sword Coast. Like that has been already like written. We know who they are. We know their names. So when we have a new game like the Dark Alliance game that says that there's this dragon called Icewind, that's new. Like that doesn't exist, right? So like at least we know who they are in terms of just the adults and the young ones or whatever. Yeah, I mean, like you said, they could be sleeping, they could be somewhere else. I mean, we don't really know. The reality is that the thing to understand is that humans are powerful, very, very powerful. Humans, dwarves, elves, humanoids are monsters don't want to fuck with us. Like they really don't. So like they're out there. I mean, how many caves can a mountain have? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you look at how like you look at the Desert Valley in Prince of the Apocalypse, right? And just like, it's just a valley. It's just a small valley. Like it's really not that big. And how many different creatures and monsters and secret things you can find in there. And that there's a mega dungeon hidden underneath the valley. Like nobody knows because the entrances are sealed. And it's just like, you know what I mean? And then there's like the Underdark, which is a whole other thing, right?
Yeah, you're farming your onions and stuff and your leeks for the Waterdeep market, and next thing you know, there's an earth tremor and a dwarven crypt is uncovered, and you're like, oh shit, bad news.
I think it's really important to keep in mind that all the lore stuff that all of us talk about, like on a daily basis, is meant to serve the game, right? So the reason if you look at the real reason a lot of stuff exists is because it was interesting and cool and it was going to serve a neat adventure or something related to one of the books or something that was meant to be enjoyed, right? But if you really want to like come up with a reason how all these things can be existing, you can find the logic there. Like there are ways to do that. The way that I've always kind of looked at this problem or question, I guess, is that there's a version of the Forgotten Realms out there where all of this stuff is all happening like at the same time, and it's probably pandemonium.
Yeah.
But each version of the Forgotten Realms, like say I'm DMing a game next week and it's going to be set in the Sword Coast or whatever, each version of the Forgotten Realms that each individual DM has, they choose which things are happening at any given time, right? Like, I don't think there's any one true version of it because every game is going to leave things out that the DM doesn't want to include or incorporate things. So, but yeah, I do think that it's possible to find an explanation for like how all this stuff can be existing at the same time. I just think when you're talking from a game standpoint, it's not necessarily something you need to figure out. Unless, of course, what you're trying to do.
As I'm investigating and stuff, I like to piece it all together. Like, how could that fit in? You know, that's the excitement for me as somebody who's researching this stuff. Like, you know, whereabouts are these tombs and crypts located? What were the historical reasons that they existed, and how could that influence the world that I'm building in my head? So the more I research, the more nuanced and subtle things in the Forgotten Realms become. So, like, I'm researching diamonds and resurrection and stuff like that at the moment, and how that could influence local laws for what weapons you can carry. It's that nuanced, right? But at the same time, the world for me is it's a powder keg constantly ready to explode when the players touch it. So they're the catalyst that touches it off. So things don't necessarily explode until the adventure gets going, and then the adventurers set stuff off. So it could be the dragons and the giants are almost at loggerheads. The Netherall Empire is almost resurging and coming back from the Shadowfell. The Imaskari hidden cities and things like that have not been discovered until the players discover them. And that sort of thing. Like, they discover some huge diamond mine that the dwarves somehow missed, you know, or some cache of diamonds that the elves left behind in a crypt. Unfortunately, they're tied in with locking down some horrible things from their past that they've buried, you know. So it's like everything exists in potential in my games, and I like to have that potential mapped out so I can use it. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that the world is a living and dynamic place. There's Tressums and Griffins and Manticores and all that sort of stuff everywhere.
And some might not even exist, right? Like a centaur, like they might literally just not exist in the Sword Coast. But there's other areas. I mean, the Forgotten Realms is huge. Like, there's so much. It's like a whole planet, right? That clearly is totally not meant to reflect Earth at all.
Yeah,
not really. But it's in terms of the large creatures, like I said, like, yeah, like there aren't like a lot of ancient dragons. Like there's like 5. We know their names. We know who they are. Like there's one blue one in the desert. There's one red one, and it's in the mountains over here. Like that's it. Like Krakens, there's probably one Kraken. It's the one, you know, like that's it.
Yeah, it's a legendary monster. Like, the original Medusa. There's just 3 Gorgons, you know. Originally, there's just one Hydra in the entire world, you know. So how much do you know as a player, and how much does your character actually know, and how much of what your character knows is actually just mythology? It's not actually true, you know. There are no vampires. It's not actually true.
That'd be a good twist to throw in on a Curse of Strahd campaign.
Yeah, it's actually just a zombie in a castle.
Just dude.
The castle is just a mimic. The castle is the actual vampire.
Or it's just a really talented bard who's convinced everyone that he's a vampire.
It's a goblin behind a curtain.
No, but a good example is like if you play Baldur's Gate 3, the video game, like it's a very small area. Like the actual playable area that we have access to, it's very small. And just look at the vast number of creatures too that exist there. I mean, you get all kinds of stuff. You get like harpies, you know, you have owlbears, you have hags, like we have red caps too. Like, there's all kinds of stuff in there. It's a very small area. So like just envision that, but on a grander scale. I mean, there's so many, the wilderness in these worlds, like if you're playing a fantasy game, like a lot of even the Sword Coast, it's called the Savage Lands for a reason too, right? Like a lot of these places are just not guarded or roaded. It's just wilderness and nobody goes there.
Yeah. And also, giants fucking eat people. Like on the Savage North, I think there's a giant that's got somebody on a spit. You know, it's they eat people. Some of them do. Okay. On that topic, when I talk about game balance, I'm thinking about the game world, right? So the world is balanced in a way. It's not just necessarily the mechanics and things, because the stats and abilities of ordinary NPC villagers, townsfolk, town guards, and things like that are more important than the player characters when it comes to defending a city from powerful monsters, because the adventurers aren't there most of the time. They're off elsewhere, so they can't really depend on these high level adventurers and things like that to look after them. So what do you mean when you talk about game balance? Is it just purely mechanics, or is it tied in with the world, or what?
I mean, it's a term that I feel like if you were to tell me like game balance in terms of D&D, I would always imagine mechanical. Like that's the first thing that would come to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, I don't like, because it's an odd question. I'm trying to think of what is a world that is balanced, because does that also comply to worlds like the plane of water or the plane of, like, is that balanced to you, kind of a thing? Or are you saying that the power level of normal humans reflects the world that they're in? That's what you mean when you say balance? So like,
yeah. So in 5th edition, for instance, if you use the mob combat rules, which are very, very streamlined and they're a great way of handling mass combat, you basically break everything up into groups that can achieve a certain amount of hits. I've gone over this. It's in the DMG, so go and check it out. But what it boils down to is the town guard of Waterdeep could easily take on an adult dragon that's attacking the city, and they could kill it in 10 rounds, guaranteed. So the dragon just would not do that. It just wouldn't openly attack the city, because, as MrRhexx said, they would get wiped out by the humans really quickly. Not only that, but the humans would very quickly rally a force and go out and find that dragon and take it out. So we're like an ant nest, you know. You rile us up and we take you out.
Which has happened in the story too, a fair amount of times. Who's the lady that rules over Waterdeep? Silverhand, Laryl Silverhand. I'm pretty sure there was a Arbitrus or something went on this rampage once, and she just like, okay, you know what? She teleported over to the lair of Arbitrus and was like, stop it, or I'm gonna fuck you up, and that was it. It just stopped. I do attempt at least to keep some semblance of like, you know, balance in terms of just making sure that, like, for example, like my guards don't feel like complete pushovers, which is something that can happen. Realistically speaking, yeah, like you can have your adventures, if they become stronger, be so strong that they are commanding in the presence of like the merely guards or whatever. But like you also need to make sure that they can't just take over the city, I guess.
Yeah. Because they've become a political power when they get to like a 10th level cleric. As before we started recording, MrRhexx and I were talking about clerics and how they can run like insurance for life insurance that actually brings you back from the dead, and how they could pull in, like a single cleric could pull in per 100,000 people about 400,000 gold per year, right? So that it doesn't make any sense that they would go off and risking their lives and adventuring when they could run a church with a major political power over a big city. So like when your adventurers, like on the one hand, it's okay to say the spotlight should always be on the player characters and they should be the heroes and stuff, but they're not the biggest fish in the pond. And even a 10th level cleric, when the characters are level 15, can rally an entire hobgoblin army and a dragon against them if they interrupt the political power that person has. And nobles and things like that have got a lot of, like, they call them coin mountains in the parlance of Forgotten Realms, where they've got almost unlimited resources thanks to generations of trade routes, having a stranglehold on silk and iron trade. Another thing that 5th edition is really lax on, that we had from a previous campaign guidebook, our Guide to the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, it had all of the, in this book, it's got all the trade goods and routes that they have across the continent. That's not available to new players of the game if they want to seriously talk about like political power and trade and embargoes and like, you know, the whole relationship between Sembia and Cormier, for instance, was really trade based and stuff. The Sea of Fallen Stars is an incredibly important trade route across the central continent, things like that. So yeah,
I think it also depends a lot on the adventure too, because you could have I've been reading Berserk, and Berserk it's a low magic world in which you have one guy that can literally just take over a town. He's just that powerful, and the villains are just like, yeah, we can't send 100 people to fight this guy because he's just that strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do a good job of making it feel realistic, even though it is a low magic world in which you would imagine that would be even rarer. But if the point of the adventure is to make you like really feel like you're that hero, then that's fine, right? But it's about like making sure that your adventure makes sense. So like if your characters do have the ability to just influence the world to that capacity, then you just got to make sure that you as a character or as the DM like narrate it so that like you would like what would happen if Superman just came into the town, right? Like everyone would just be like, oh, these guys are gone.
Right.
Yeah. You got to make sure that you do that if the players do have that power.
See, now we're getting on to how I'm talking about game balance being an in-world element as well. Like, for instance, if I'm looking at other role-playing games, Rifts, for instance, you do have that post-apocalyptic world where despots who have like some power armor or some old technology or some cybernetic implants or something like that are literally taking over the town. The Mandalorian, for instance, he shows up in that town. That guy is the town sheriff simply because he's got some Mandalorian armor and he's got some equipment and stuff to protect these people from some sand beast, you know, or typical sort of raiders and stuff, but they can't deal with a crag dragon or whatever the hell it's called until he comes along, and he's the hero that tips the balance and organizes everybody, you know, sorts out their relationship with the sand people, that sort of thing. So that's a classic sort of Dark Sun world setting story as well, where the settlements are really despotic, horrible places ruled over by some, you know, evil force or whatever. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about with game balance.
Yeah, I think it's very important, I guess, in all things, but specifically when talking about game balance from like an in-world perspective like that, to really look at like as a DM, when you're plotting out a game session, what is your goal, right? Like what is the goal for what you want the party to achieve, or at the very least feel like they're capable of achieving? Like if they want to topple the tyrant ruler of a city, do you want the adventure to feel like they can just roll in, bust down the doors and just have a fight, like a big combat with this guy? Or do you want it to feel like a desperate struggle where they have to like meet up with the underground and like really use the spies and like what information they have access to like formulate a plan and like bring people together to like help them do this, right? Both are perfectly fine, but the power level of the world and the power level of your players is probably going to shift significantly depending on what you're going for, right? So I guess, yeah, it's just important to consider that when you're going one way or the other with this, because like I think it's fine that you have a town guard that's capable of taking out a dragon, right? Like maybe if they live in a place where dragon attacks are frequent, probably not like an ancient dragon, but like a young one that would come in, maybe they have like ballista mounted on top of the walls and stuff, like, yeah, who knows, right?
It'll be dusty, it'll have flags hanging off it, you know, the kids will be playing, yeah, they'll turn it into a play set for children and stuff, but every now and then they'll break that boy out, and they've got the, you know, like the magical arrows, which are, you know,
totally. And like if you want that to be the power level of like this city, sure, but then you also have to ask yourself, okay, so what is a problem that they can't deal with then, right? So like, is there something else that's even scarier if you're talking about like monsters that the party might have to help contend with? Or maybe their problem isn't dealing with dragon attacks, maybe their problem is dealing with bandits, because it's a lot easier to get everyone focused on a single dragon, like, oh, dragons here, get the ballistas out, than it is to necessarily watch like all 30 different supply lines coming into the city at all times, right? Like that's a weirdly lesser threat, but could still be something that a civilization like that might encounter, right? Or maybe their problem is like resources, who knows, right? But
I think you're making some like interesting assumptions though, because let's say that we have the town guard guy who can take out a dragon. Maybe they're the enemy, Like you go out and you're just like, oh, dragon, there's like 2 dragons left in the world, you know? And so this is all story. Like, what's the story you want to tell? And that would reflect your game, I guess, and finding the villain and things like that. So yeah, maybe these ancient dragons are really strong, and there's only 2 left because so-and-so city guard, you know, Hank over here, he's gotten real good at killing all the dragons. Well, is that having repercussions on the world? Like, are dragons supposed to be there? Is Hank mad with power? Do we
now
need to
the
take
red
him
dragon
out?
that can smell the bloodline of Hank starts attacking the descendants of Hank, the dragon slayer?
For generations, there's been a war going on, a secret war between the nobility and the trade houses and a cult of doppelgangers who have hidden within prominent city officials. Perhaps the clergy is completely dominated by doppelgangers. They have the humans have been staying in power by a wag the dog sort of scenario where they stir up trouble with a large monster that requires the military industrial complex to be geared up under their control, and they've managed to stay in power by having a constant crisis, but they've run out of evil dragons. Now they're starting to target the good ones.
So I guess I wouldn't think of balance as, I don't know, in a world I wouldn't think of balance as this many peasants could actually take down this monster, because you're making assumptions already in that world that this is just infinitely stronger than your base person. But there could be, I don't know, like I'm thinking of Eberron, there are lots of threats, but for the most part, there's infighting between all of the different organizations, and that's the threat. So it's okay that everybody's kind of over the top, but then you have the Scarred Land campaign setting, which is like ancient Greek gods walking the earth. That's going to be very different, and it's just based on the type of story you want to tell with that campaign setting. So
yeah, because like you can have, I love the idea that you can have a posse of peasants with their, what do you call their tridents, their little hay thingies, and the pitchforks and their torches, and they assault what is it, Frankenstein's little keep, and just kill him and the monster, right? But then you can also have a Curse of Strahd adventure where the peasants revolt with a mage and they just fail and they all die, and both are conducive, I think, to great stories. I am particularly fond of the low magic kind of like the spear of a peasant it's still a spear, still can penetrate your heart, right? I like that, but at the same time, you know.
Give me like 4 rounds to cast this spell. No. You know, like, I'm dead.
See, that's the element of why I think the 5th edition is finally balanced, because a peasant can attack a dragon and hurt it. In 4th edition, a peasant can't. It just can't. And so
just never get through his armor class, kind of a thing.
Right, yeah. And same with 3rd edition, 3.5 edition. You get to that point where only player characters are able to deal with something like that, and only high-level characters, people with character classes, so that implies that they were once, you know, adventurers or something. So yeah I am
pretty brutal with mobs. Like if you get surrounded by a mob, like they're gonna crate you automatically. Like that's I don't know, well, that's me. I kind of like it when you can't just necessarily just be like Super Saiyan 3 Goku mode and just kill 200 peasants. Like that feels good to me.
Nobody gets better at taking a sword to the gut. Like it's always, you're still a human, you know. So your armor may be great.
Where the barbarian can jump off a 400 foot cliff and survive. Like I don't play that game.
Yeah. If a huge dragon gets you in its jaws, its bite force is enough to bite you in half. It doesn't matter what your hit points are. It just doesn't. You're just a meat.
Unless you're Hank, because Hank is immune to dragon attacks.
Hank,
that's right,
guys. I think we need to start making Hank characters. And
Hank is the opposite of Kevin.
This whole time I've been just picturing Hank as Hank Hill from King of the Hill, but like with a spear.
That's exactly the correct image. I don't know why you're apologizing.
I defeated dragons with the power of propane. All right.
Damn dragons.
They're minerals, Marie. That's my Hank.
Okay. So we've got a spicy one here. Everyone jokes that the real Forgotten Realms is everywhere other than the Sword Coast. Fair. But how come nobody is writing about Karashaka or Maztica, and why am I not writing lore about Ossi, or Aussie, which is the pun? And although Ed Greenwood and others have said that Forgotten Realms is not an allegory for the real world, our Earth, Katashaka is definitely called the Dark Continent. Mazdaka is definitely South America. Karatura is definitely Asia. And Odyssey is definitely Australia. So, we already have the tools to run a conversion of Spelljammer and Planescape. People asking for 5th edition books on that stuff are basically looking for a rehash of old lore with updated rules. And are invariably pissed off when they get updated lore and very basic rules adaptations. So it's not really, Wizards of the Coast is not really going to satisfy anybody when they put out, Spelljammer Part 2 or Planescape Part 2. What are your thoughts on that sort of stuff? Are we going to see that sort of stuff, or are we just going to see Magic the Gathering and some faerun?
There's a possibility that they'll retouch on those. I'm not sure, but I mean, the answer is racism. Like, that's why they're not touching it. That's why they're not remaking it. That's why they're not publishing adventures there, is that those were not the most, I don't know.
Culturally sensitive.
Yeah, sensitive. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. They were not very culturally sensitive. That being said, there's a lot of really cool things in those things if you can get past that. And specifically, I really love Al-Qadim, mostly because I love the
Tales of the Arabian Nights.
Yeah, mythology and Aladdin and 1001 Nights and things like that. There was a DM's Guild product where they took all of that old information, because you're allowed to, using that when you take Wizards IP, you can use it and redo it. And they made a 5th edition supplement, and it's really good. Like, I would run a game using just that 5th edition D&D in Al-Qadim. I think that would be really awesome. And they're very aware of what it was, and they had a lot of consultants and things like that, and it's very well put together. So I think Wizards can do this if they want to. I don't think they're going to, because of the racism aspect, but more importantly, I think they want to forge ahead with something else. And the copious amounts of Magic the Gathering worlds and lore they have seems to lend itself easier to that. So, and I've talked about this where I think, on the Magic the Gathering side, I don't think they're trying to absorb the Forgotten Realms, but I definitely think the Forgotten Realms wants to have its multiverse be Magic the Gathering. And branching out from there. So I don't know, I'm still surprised we don't have a Planescape book and things like that, but with more Magic the Gathering source books, that's probably the direction they want to go, where it's you just mysteriously get there. There's no hub wheel to kind of walk through necessarily. So,
well, the big signpost we had was the Dream of the Blue Veil spell.
Yeah.
And that's oh, there it is. That's the Planeswalker Spark in a nutshell. It's just a spell that essentially people can use. And a large part of, I think, what they did with Magic the Gathering recently, with the mending and everything, was just adjust it and get it within a framework that a role-playing game could handle. Where the player characters actually do matter, and Planeswalkers aren't gods. So yeah. It's definitely the signposts are all there for us.
But go look around. That Al-Qadim thing is really good. I made a video on it. And I wouldn't be surprised if people in the future are I'm going to make a Dark Sun, and I'm in a Discord group of 5th edition Spelljammer players, and they're just trying to upgrade the rules. They're all the stuff's still there. You can still play in those worlds. And there's a part of me that's I don't know. I thought it would be really cool to have Wizards shine a light on the thing that you love. If you love Dark Sun, it would be really cool if they brought Dark Sun back. But the fact that I can get these printed copies of old Dark Sun stuff, because they're reprinting them on demand, I don't need, the books are not hard to find anymore. So I don't need Wizards to make an updated thing when the old stuff's available. That's my opinion. I think
Wizards of the Coast doesn't have any control over the wiki pages and things like that. So if wiki pages decided to put 5th edition stats for all the monsters, there's not a lot that Wizards of the Coast could really do about it when you think about it. So we've got all of the resources information-wise, lore-wise. So that's the intangible stuff, the non-5th edition stuff. 5th edition rules are very basic and can be easily applied using like the challenge rating system and stuff like that to convert pretty much any sort of lore that you want. You can just put skins over top of existing monsters and
that's what I do.
Vehicles and things.
Like, you read a monster, you read an adventure, and it's like they encounter a Rakshasa here. And you're like, okay, and you open your book and you just use a Rakshasa. Like, so, or they encounter some kind of space aboleth, and you're like, oh, this one looks like it could be that. I don't know. So
yeah. So I'm of the opinion that we don't need a 5th edition supplement or a spelljammer supplement. A planescape supplement or a spelljammer supplement, because we've got all the resources we already need.
Yeah. I do think the biggest. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to quickly say, I think the biggest thing that people are looking for, specifically when it comes to Spelljammer, the Spelljammer obviously has a lot of rules about spelljamming, like that kind of stuff, which isn't necessarily as easy as monster stats to just 1-to-1 convert into 5th edition, but like you can still do it. You just, and like people have done it, right? Like that stuff that you can find on the internet if you look for it. I think that there's just like this unspoken comfort that some people get with something being not homebrew and officially put out, as if it's like, yes, this is balanced.
And that's the rub. People want, like, as soon as Wizards says it's okay, then they're like, oh, all right. And this kind of goes full circle to that other topic we were talking about third-party publishers, where I'm a firm believer that you need to look at Wizards of the Coast stuff the same as you do third-party publishers, because a lot of the stuff that they're making is incredible. Some of it you're like, oh, that, like, there's a new Kickstarter I saw today that had 150 subclasses, and I'm like, okay, that's a little too much for Jordan, probably. Like, that's cool and all. I like the idea that you're doing that, but like, holy cow. But at the same time, the worlds and the stuff that they're making, it's like, well, let's do that. And then I hear people, I went and bought Icewind Dale, and I'm like, I'm really disappointed with it. And I'm like, well, read a review. Like, maybe you didn't need to get it. Yes, it's Wizards of the Coast, but like if you don't like it, go run something else. There's lots of other cool stuff. Yeah, lots of cool third-party stuff.
I do think that we are eventually going to get that desert adventure. Probably won't be like all is it Hakim? Quick, I don't remember the name of it.
Al-Qadim, yeah. I don't know if I'm saying it right. That's how I say it. So
yeah, but I don't know. Obviously,
the continent of Saqqara.
Yeah, I don't know if we're ever gonna get that. But I think a desert adventure it's probably going to happen, because Wizards has been doing this thing where like they just kind of focus on like thematic location-based adventures. Like we got the frozen like Icewind Dale, we have the jungle Chult, and we have the Nine Hells adventure and like Feywild, obviously. So it might just be a matter of time. We have the underwater one with Kozalmar.
Shadowfell would be fun. So
yeah.
That would be
so
super cool.
I guess
also it looks like we're going to have domains of light, like an opposition to the planes of dark, the domains of dread. We might have domains of light. What would that look like? I would like also to see a plane of dreams. As sort of an adjunct to the Feywild and the astral plane.
But I think that we're more likely to get stuff like that than to get Planescape, man. It sucks because Planescape it's some of the best work that they have ever done. But it's also, there's so many books to Planescape that like the closest thing that we could ever get would be a Manual of the Planes, which would just be like a bastardization of Planescape. Like we're never gonna get just like, here's a lore book about the Abyss. Like here's a book about, we never even got one for the Feywild, but like we got so much stuff. We got spoiled in second edition with Planescape.
Here's the problem with Planescape and Dark Sun and Dragonlance. There is a strong drive for nostalgia players to want to have a rehash of those settings for 5th edition. However, those people generally don't play the later stages of those adventure settings. So when the timeline advanced and stuff happened in Dark Sun, or when the faction war happened in Planescape, or when Dragonlance has got several different ages, and they're very specific about what age they play in, and if you're not within that narrow comfort zone that they have in that setting, they're not going to want it. So the question is like Anybody who's making something like that for you is doomed from the start unless they're directly catering to your specific thing that you want. And then what happens to all that stuff that happened after it? It just gets wiped.
We us here, we are the very small percentage of consumers that buy Wizards of the Coast products. Realistically, the vast majority of consumers are just people that don't even know what Planescape even is, or they've never even played Dungeons and Dragons before 4th edition. I mean, you have to understand. I don't know, man. I feel you look at Twitch, people that play Dungeons and Dragons, it's just normal people that don't they don't consume it the way that we do.
Yeah,
right.
I put a poll out saying, what monsters do you want me to have? None of the people knew what those monsters were. They didn't know what the Campestri were, even though. And this is the other thing that really shocked me. Dungeons and Dragons website had just put out an article on the Campestri, which are in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and nobody knew what I was talking about because nobody had gone to the Dungeons and Dragons website and read the article. Everybody's going to D&D Beyond. It's the official website of Dungeons and Dragons. It's actually not. So nobody's reading stuff that Wizards of the Coast is actually putting out day to day. The Campestri, they originally came out 28 years ago. That's why nobody's heard of them before. Second edition players are oh, the Singing Mushroom's fantastic. So nobody had heard of them.
It's in the the community is really, everyone knows what Dungeons and Dragons is. And a lot of people, you can grab any person, you could give them the game and they'll enjoy it. And they probably know what it is. But the actual community that watches YouTube videos or consumes in-depth Dungeons and Dragons content is crazy small compared to the actual audience of people that buy the product. And that's I'm not even trying to, I started in 5th edition. I'm one of those guys. The only reason I know these things is because it is my job and I started the YouTube channel to do it, right? Mm-hmm. I would just be another one of those kids that is just I don't even know what a beholder is, but I bought the book because the beholder looked cool. I don't know.
And how many? I think they did studies and stuff that a lot of people will just, hey, let's play D&D, and you play from levels 2 to 4, and you're that was fun, and then you take some time off, and then somebody else is let's play, and all of that is just going and seeing a forest and attacking various goblins and things like that. I don't know. Yeah, I think you're right, AJ, though, that the people that want Planescape and Spelljammer the most are also the ones that will be so upset when it comes out because it won't be what they want. And as evidenced by Van Richten's guide, because there was so many they changed this, and I'm
that's perfect example. In the Facebook group of Ravenloft and stuff, when we asked people, somebody said it had bad reviews, everybody who's a new player of the game said, oh no, it's fantastic, I really like it. Everybody who was an older player who had the original Van Richten's guides are no, it's terrible, it missed out on this and this and this and gypsies and blah. And we're well, it wasn't for you.
Yeah. Because I think it's important to keep in mind that all that old stuff still exists, right? When a new book like Van Richten's Guide comes out and it's oh, they changed something. It's I understand that it can be kind of a bummer where it's okay, in the general accepted common lore, something that you didn't like was changed or shifted. I totally can empathize with that. But at the same time, that has no effect on what you do at your table, right? If they cut out a specific type of monster or race, or they change something, whatever, and you want to include that or not include something that's new, you just can. You get to do that, right? Which I think is important to keep in mind with all this stuff, because it's easy to get upset about things that ultimately just ends up making us upset and not actually doing anything constructive, right?
One of the controversial topics which I've largely avoided talking about on my channel is the combat wheelchair and disabled adventurers and things. And I've been mulling it over, honestly, on the fence, sort of thinking, pros, cons, pros, cons,
could you
pros,
elaborate?
cons.
I don't even know what this is.
Okay, so a third-party content creator who's basically came up with a wheelchair option for player characters who have got a disability where they can't walk or whatever, or they're differently mobile parlance. Anyway, And that obviously generated a lot of kickback from people who are like, you can't be a disabled person in a wheelchair in a dungeon because there's stairs and all that sort of stuff. I just finished watching the Tokyo Special Olympics, which, by the way, is way more entertaining and amazing and inspiring than the regular Olympics, if you ask me. And those guys playing like wheelchair rugby and things like that are absolutely mind-blowing. They get knocked over and they just flip themselves back up again. It's almost like they're crashing into each other with those things. It's incredible. So I was like, yeah, I could definitely see somebody being an adventurer in a wheelchair for sure. And also, like with investigating raised dead spells and things like that, they don't restore lopped off limbs and things like that. So
I just find it interesting that like you would go for the wheelchair rather than just like, here's a cool mount. Like I don't know why. I mean, it's it's one of those things where like it's what I said before with the third party stuff. Is like it's consumer stuff, right? Like if there's a market for this, like if you want to do that, then like power to you, man. Like this is a fantasy world, you can do whatever. I mean, it would make more sense to have like a cool mount that could do like, and you can make all kinds of really like badass looking spider mounts that you could mount that could go in a dungeon, right?
Yeah. So it comes down to representation in the game, options for like, you know, there would be people who don't have access to special mounts or exotic animals or magic and things like that in their day-to-day life, and they've got to get by somehow. And if adventuring is the only option they have, then that's what they're going to do. So yeah, I can see how it works. Like, I'd just like to officially say I'm okay with wheelchairs in Dungeons and Dragons. I've got no problem with it whatsoever. And I think it's a great tool to have that you can introduce into your games if your players want that, you know, or introduce an NPC or something like that. And yeah, that's my thoughts. But
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, like you said, just watching any of the Special Olympics, like even like you can just YouTube that kind of stuff, and it's crazy. I'm like, okay, this person's doing stuff that I can't even do as someone who doesn't use a wheelchair, right? So it's like, if you're adventurer, you're assuming, especially if they're playing someone who's like strength or dex or both based, like they're not your average person either, right? Like this isn't like your 90-year-old grandparent who uses a wheelchair to get around. This is like someone who wants to be an adventurer. So like, I think that it's reasonable, and like at the very least, it's fantasy, right? Like you can do whatever you want. It's I don't think worth getting upset about.
Yeah. I think the kickback against it was quite unreasonable. Like it was just like over the top, really. That's why I was kind of on the fence about it, and I was just like, and really gave it some thought and mapped it out in my head.
In terms of like practical utility, like there's so many ways in game for you to, like, if your character like loses their legs, there are so many ways to fix that problem. But if like you're like in real life, you're handicapped, right? Like you have a wheelchair and you want to identify with a character that does that too. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't, like, that would be such weird. That would be so weird. Imagine being a DM and just being like, no, you can't do that. Like, I don't know, that's kind of cringe.
Yeah. Like if a character, like if a person is born without legs, you know, like they've got the whole leg's there, but it's like, you know, it's some environmental like potion or something like that has messed up the water supply, and you've got basically, you know, a birth defect or something. There's no fixing that with the spells and things in Dungeons and Dragons, short of like a wish or something like that. But the and the question comes down to, there should be options for that sort of representation of the game. Also, on the flip side of that, sorcerers and things like that as superheroes is something that I find quite interesting. That I don't really see a lot of that in the game. Like, instead of just like the spellcaster, you know, what if they were representing themselves as having superpowers? Like a warlock is more like a traditional superhero or supervillain, like cape and all, flying around, you know, super strength, etc. Do you ever run characters or have people running characters like that? Like Witchbolt, for instance, is right up there with superpowers.
I in 3.5, one of the first characters I ever made actually was a scion, and that was kind of his setup, because he could do things that like sorcerers could do, but he did it telepathically, and like no one really understood how he could do it. So he presented as like a superhero who just like had these powers that were unexplainable to most people. I think it can be fun to do that. But again, it also comes down to like knowing your game and knowing your genre, right? Like if I brought that character to a game where it was like a grim, dark vibe, like I wouldn't bring that character to a Dark Sun game and expect it to be welcomed with open arms.
Yes, flamboyant superhero.
I love that idea, though. I've never done that, but now I'm just picturing a wizard that casts fly and Tensor's transformation on them. And so they're this like big buff guy with a cape, and they zoom in and they like save an orphanage, but they have to do it within like a 10-minute window because that's how long their spell lasts.
Yeah,
it's like he always like disappears.
They've already cast the spells.
Here.
They've got it quickened and everything, and the keyword is Shazam, and the Shazam just completes those spells. And they're the protectors of Waterdeep, you know.
Yeah, it would be so funny, and it's just
like My Hero Academia. Like, I got 5 minutes.
Yeah. I think that's really funny, and I would definitely put something silly like that, like, oh yeah, that's Captain Marvelous. He saves our town every once in a while, but only so many times a day, and then he goes into hibernation or something. Like,
and you need them to have a sidekick who's like a level 1 cleric who can come in and cast thaumaturgy to like make a display as they come out of the burning building or whatever.
Yeah. What's that guy? Mysterio from the latest Spider-Man movie. He's exactly the same sort of way. He uses illusions and things like that to portray himself as having superpowers. I mean, really, when you think about it, player characters are superheroes, right? Or supervillains, or super anti-heroes. So yeah, it's just a progression of that. All right, everyone. I think that pretty much wraps it up for this session. What do you think? Is anybody anything else they want to talk about?
No, I'm okay.
It's kind of weird bringing it back, but I just got the link that you posted, Jordan, about the
wheelchair.
So I stand by everything that I said, right? Make a cringe if you can't have the wheelchair. That's kind of weird. If you do that, you're cringe. However, and this is like the main distinction that I would like to make. I did not like that they changed Esmeralda. That I will stand by. The thing about Esmeralda, the thing about Curse of Strahd, and this is just more like maybe I never got into the Ravenloft back in the day. Maybe I would have been one of those kids that would have been angry about the new Ravenloft book or whatever. But like, if you're gonna make a grimdark adventure, make it grimdark. If you're in a world in which like you don't know who you're talking to, like any person you talk to in a bar could be a werewolf or could be a vampire. Like, you don't want to show weakness. Like, you're gonna hide the fact that one of your legs is metallic. Like, that's just gonna happen. Like, this is a woman that has experienced like a life of death and combat and has suffered since she was a child. And she's like gone through, like, because she doesn't just travel through Ravenloft. She, like, as a Vistani, probably travels through all of the Dread Domains. And like, that's like cutthroat territory. Like, this has nothing to do with being ashamed of what you are, right? It's just more like, I don't want to die. And like, this is dangerous. Like, you don't never know who you're talking to, right? So that I will stand by that, because I saw it in the post thing. But otherwise, yeah, like, dude, don't make, like, don't be that guy that makes it weird. Like, you can't be crippled in the game. Like, come on. That's cringe.
Yeah, I also like there's a faction of the Badine people who are like the Magi in the Mummy, who try and keep things under wraps. Like, they know that there's horrible like ruins
under
and stuff.
Wraps.
And yeah, there's
well played, sir.
So they will actively find adventurers who are planning on going into the Anarok Desert and discovering the Netheril Empire, and they will stop them. They'll assassinate them. They'll stop them by any means possible to keep things, to balance the status quo. I like that kickback against adventurers and discovery. Like, it kind of like is a reflection of the grognards who don't want anything new in the game. Yeah. Also, I'm really looking forward to Strixhaven, and I'm really looking forward to I want to see like Zendikar and all that sort of stuff. I really love the Magic the Gathering arena stuff that I've been playing, and the card sets have got me really inspired for that sort of thing. So I'm fully on board. I'm fully sold with the Magic the Gathering crossovers for Dungeons and Dragons, 100%. So yeah, and what was the one that's got lots of vampires and werewolves in it? Innistrad, yeah, that looks really exciting. The video that we're talking about,
coming out.
Yeah, And like the background lore and stuff, where that's like it's a permanent night, or the nights are getting longer and longer, and like the dark forces are taking over. Oh,
I don't know much about Innistrad, but I love Magic the Gathering art, and there's a few pieces where you have angels with crimson red wings burning towns, and I'm like, dude. And there's one where you have like the vampire lord, the planeswalker guy, just like doing like a snap, and like he kills and the angel's like burning alive or something. Like I love that stuff. Like I love a lot of dark horror stuff. I don't know if that's what the place is or whatever, but I love that. Exactly
what it is.
And you hand me anything and it'll be a slapstick game of hilarity and yeah.
But I
haven't got everybody splitting their sides with laughter.
I need adventures, all right? Like if it's a campaign setting without any adventures, like I'm not even gonna bother. Like I'm not gonna play it. I need for there to be an adventure with it. That's what I want.
If they give the same treatment that they gave Theros, I'll be very happy. That Theros book is sick. I like it a lot. And it has one like fully fleshed out adventure in it, but it also, for every deity, of which there are like I think 12, there's a bunch of them, every single one has like, here's 4 different adventures with like 2 battle maps that aren't like fully fleshed out, but they're just like ideas, and like the maps and stuff are there, and then it has one like legit adventure and plus all the other stuff. So if they do that kind of thing with Strixhaven, like, or even Innistrad, I would be so happy.
Yeah. Also, shout out to XP to Level 3 and his Kickstarter book with the replayability of those adventures, with the elements that you can mix and match and replay adventures with different takes on them. More of that, please, Wizards of the Coast. I want random roll tables for towns, elements, mix and match monsters, the works. I want randomized demon tables and stuff like that for that sort of thing. I want spells on the fly. I want an expanded wild magic list, all that sort of stuff.
That is the Questonomicon on Kickstarter, if you're interested in that.